Welcome to the Economy of the Collapse, episode 5. When representation die and a nation transform. We see what is going on right now with MP crossing the floor. That's kind of the angle to start with. Because most people think, or still think, that we are witnessing something political. Crossing the floor is just politics, right? I mean, in politics, these things can happen, but it's not. And if you want to understand what is happening in Canada, you don't start with opinions. You start with numbers. That's what we are going to look at. And that's the basis of this monologue today. Let's begin with democracy, because something is definitely shifting. We are now seeing elected officials. People voted in under one set of conviction, crossed the floor and realigned themselves with the governing system. Not after years of ideological change, but sometimes in a matter of weeks. Think about it. From pro-life to pro-choice overnight. And in doing so, they reverse positions that were once presented as foundational. That's not evolution. That's alignment with power. Corruption needed to switch a pro-life to a pro-choice. That's the only explanation. In those negotiations, things are offered to get a change of heart on conviction that one would expect can change. That's the essence of corruption. It might be legal, but the heart has been corrupted. We see a Christian being massacred for not embracing Islam in Nigeria, 500,000 in a year. But they prefer to die. They prefer to die than renounce Jesus Christ. But here, politicians are willing to change fundamental position for a limousine and a driver. A functioning democracy is simple, right? I mean, citizens elect a representative. That representative then travel all the way to Ottawa to carry their voice into the system. But what we are witnessing now is the inversion of that model. Political actors are no longer primarily aligned with their constituents. They are aligning with the structure that holds power. Being in power is very lucrative. One could just look at Justin Trudeau, who is being reported now being worth more than $100 million after starting with $3 million that he got from his father. Zelensky of Ukraine has bought the biggest ranch in the US, think about it. Pelosi beats Warren Buffett, return on capital 5-1. I mean, these are just a little anecdotes, but I mean, it's easy to start to dig a little bit there. And when staying in power becomes the objectives, representation becomes secondary. Now let's connect this to the economy, because this is where the number becomes impossible to ignore. Since 2015, Canada's federal debt has grown from approximately $600 billion to over $1.2 trillion, to the point that the parliamentary budget officer, who's usually pretty reserved, stated in Parliament committee that, it's not sustainable. And his definition of not sustainable is like, it's not sustainable tomorrow. It's not just like a discourse. At the same time, food prices have increased by over 20% since 2020. Rent have surged between 20 and 30% in most major markets. Mortgage payments have doubled for many households. Meanwhile, wages have not kept pace at all. Not at all. Real purchasing power for many Canadians has declined, and some have reported that a man providing for a household in 1970, a car, a house, many kids, with a stay-at-home wife taking care of all of these kids, had the same purchasing power than today. But it's not everyone that is struggling. The top 20% of Canadians now hold 65% of total wealth. The bottom 40% hold less than 5%. And since 2020, during massive monetary expansion, real estate surge, financial asset surge, capital market surge. Think about it. Because when liquidity enters the system, it flows into assets first, right? Not wages, not evenly. But immigration play a part in there, and we will come back to it too. So the system is not neutral. It is structurally redistributing wealth upward. Now let's go deeper, because economics alone doesn't explain what's happening. Demographic do. And of course, it's tied to economics. Canada's fertility rate is now approximately 1.3 children per woman. The replacement level is 2.1, and that includes a lot of newcomers that came in the last 10 years and are having kids. It's a national average. It's not like it's like a national average. So that means that the country is no longer reproducing itself. And feminism is the biggest independent variable explaining birth rate decline in the West. At that rate, each generation becomes smaller, which creates fewer workers, more retirees, increasing pressure on public finances. More retirees means more liberal voter because they benefit from this policy. And of course, that creates a shrink on the public finance. So the system compensates. How can you do that, right? You cannot talk about the correlation between feminism and birth rate. That would not be politically acceptable. So what can you do? I mean, you get massive migration. That's the only way. In 2023 alone, Canada added over 1.2 million people. Even with recent adjustment, the plan still includes 400,000 permanent residents in 2025, plus temporary worker, plus international student, most of which stays after. Temporary is never temporary, and they overstay and the government doesn't do anything about it. So when you combine low fertility, high population inflows, and constrained housing supply, you don't just get growth, you get transformation. It's not the same country anymore. And transformation at that speed is not neutral at all. People are reacting now to the cultural change, the religious change, the visible change, the values and language change. Sharia is making inroad everywhere in the West, and there's an actual mathematical solution for when it will be required by a Muslim majority using the same democratic voting system and the same power of the state that we are witnessing now. No one is ready for that discussion, that's for sure, but demographic is, at the end of the day, a mathematical science, and you can calculate it. Canada needs approximately 3.5 additional housing units just to meet the lag by 2030, and that's not going to restore affordability. Of course, this creates massive wealth transfer to big investors like Brookfield and the like, who are hiding in fiscal paradise. And we all know Carney's tied to Brookfield, that's for sure. So the system is now balancing demographic decline, economic pressure, structural dependency. I'll zoom out a bit, because this is not just Canada. In Ireland, protests have disrupted key infrastructure right now as we speak. In France, large-scale protests have spread nationally too. In the United States, actually, Donald Trump saw that coming, and he was able to serve on that to be able to get elected and enact preemptive measure. These are not isolated events, they are signals. The government can't act on the fruit of feminism, so they are acting on limiting dissent, which is the remedy. Because the remedy to the collapse is demographic, it's a demographic increase actually. So you need mass migration to remedy demographic decline. And the only way to address that is to act limiting dissent on what now they call hate speech for people who are questioning mass migration, for example. And government don't ignore signals. They know what is coming, and they make plans for it. They prepare for them because no one can stop the economic train, even if it's socially going to crash. They will manage the crash before addressing the baby boom needed to actually avoid it. Because when you have declining purchasing power, rising cost of living, housing pressure, a demographic transformation so rapid, so strong, so visible that it creates social unrest and political alignment with power, you are not in a stable system anymore. You are in a system under pressure. And there's a deeper layer to that. And this is where most people hesitate to go. We're not being told right now that there is replacement. While it is visible, most people can't be gaslighted anymore, and they actually see it. But what we are seeing is a system that prioritizes economic continuity over demographic continuity. And there's no discussion with the citizenship about that. And when a society no longer reproduces itself and compensates through large-scale inflows, the result is not neutral. Because the migrants, once they arrive, they reproduce right now at rate to 4 to 5 children per woman. And the states provide benefits that makes having kids beneficial for a newcomer, which is not the case for the native population that is already there. So most Muslims can even have up to 4 wives, and hence 20 kids fully subsidized by the taxpayer. When you do the math, it's a story that is unraveling right in front of your eyes. It is a transformation of a country in not even 50 to 75 years, at a speed that people are not always prepared to absorb, and they don't know about it, but they see that something is coming. While being ignorant of the final result, they feel that something is wrong. Most white liberal women, feminists, are voting for politicians that are allowing massive influx of Sharia law disciples who, once in majority, will force these same women to wear a burqa. That's kind of the irony of it all. Again, the mathematical solution is real, with a date, if all else remain constant. We hope that it's not going to be the case. Now add another layer. Fertility decline is not just economic, it's cultural. Modern society, under feminism, which is antichrist, have shifted toward individual fulfillment and away from God. Career prioritization instead of God-given roles, delayed family formation, massive abortion, and later a global created IVF market worth billions. It's all part of the de-Christianization of society at the same time, and the government is pushing for that. And over time, change actually brings outcomes, and because of that, mass migration became the solution. A society that does not prioritize family formation will not sustain itself demographically. If someone would want a different outcome, it would have to recognize that. So until then, the system must compensate structurally to maintain its economic growth, and this is what keeps people in power, and they want to stay in power. But compensation is not cohesion, neither in the short, medium, or long run. And when change happens faster than integration, you don't get immediate collapse. You get fragmentation. This is exactly where we are right now, at that point. The system still functions, but no longer fully aligns. The glitch becomes apparent more often than not. And this is one of the most dangerous phases, because it looks stable from the outside, but internally, it's under tension. Here's the final layer. Every system built by man has limits. A system can sustain imbalance for a long time, but not indefinitely. Even the Roman Empire was not able to. Most empires did not. And when the gap between what people are told and what they actually live become too wide, truth reasserts itself. Not through debate, but through structure. Trust erodes, alignment weakens, legitimacy fades, and at that point the system changes. It stops being representative, becomes managerial. People are no longer represented, they are managed, and this is when they revolt. And the government is preparing for this by arming civil servants right now, 300,000 of them. So the real question is not, is something wrong? The data already answered that. The mathematics are very clear. The economy of it is clear, the demographic of it is clear. People are not ready for that discussion. Nobody wants to talk about it. The real question is, how long can the system drift away from representation while trying to maintain stability? That's the real question.